What's up? Today we're going to be looking at Romans chapter 2. What is the deal with the church? So let's just dive right in. We're continuing our Romans series, which is questions for today. We'll be looking at how Romans answers questions for today. Obviously, that's the whole sermon title. So first off, who cares? Who cares about this book that's 2,000 years old? I do, and it's because it gives us answers for life and unlocks the entire Bible. If you understand Romans, you're going to understand the New Testament, the Old Testament, all of it. And so our goal through this series is to be people who are equipped with the Bible so we can answer real life questions. Not just questions for an ancient Jew or Greek 2,000 years ago, but questions for today. So let's take a look at some context so we understand what's going on real quick. First things first, who wrote this letter? Paul. He was a guy who hated Christians, but then he encountered Jesus and his life totally turned around. Totally different. He became a missionary for Jesus, all that good stuff. Now, these letters in the New Testament are written so that we can be all that God has made us to be. And this letter is no different. So I want to be that all God has made me to be. And I'm sure you do too. So that's why we're looking at this letter. Now, this book to the church in Romans, this letter to the church in Romans, it's for a church that's full of a lot of different backgrounds. Some of them came from backgrounds who knew God. Some of them came from a generation that didn't know God. So there's a lot of different ideas in this church. And so Paul is writing this letter to correct some of those ideas. And today we're going to ask the big question, what's the deal with the church? We're going to see that here. So, questions for today. We got 5 of them that we're going to look at. Number 1, isn't the church full of hypocrites? We'll see why doesn't God like people outside the church? We'll see why are outsiders punished if they don't know any better? We'll see who really are God's people. And then finally, we'll see, aren't I good if I go to church? Now, with that, let's just jump right in. Our first question, isn't the church full of hypocrites? We're going to be looking at verses 1 through 5. So with that, I'm going to read this. And it says, "You therefore have no excuse who pass judgment on someone else. For at whatever point you judge another, you are condemning yourself, because you who pass judgment do the same things. Now we know that God's judgment against those who do such things is based on truth. So when you, a mere human being, pass judgment on them and yet do the same things, do you think you will escape God's judgment? Or do you show contempt for the riches of his kindness, forbearance, and patience, not realizing that God's kindness is intended to lead you to repentance? But because of your stubbornness and unrepentant heart, you are storing up wrath against yourself for the day of God's wrath, when his righteous judgment will be revealed." So with that, our first things first. A common criticism against Christianity is, why would I be a Christian? The church is full of hypocrites. And a hypocrite, if you don't already know, is someone who wears one face but has a different one behind. Or in other words, they act one way in public, but they act a different way in private. It means two-faced. It means you got 2 different ways of going about life. And is the church full of hypocrites? Yeah. Okay, next point. Just kidding. No, yes, it's absolutely full of hypocrites. And Paul's addressing that in this church right here. And so he says, why do you judge if you're also bad? I mean, imagine that. You're in class and a known cheater calls you out for cheating on a test. I mean, at that point, I know you're frustrated, and it's not even that they called you out. It's the hypocrisy. You are the cheater, man. And you just called me out for that? You're fine? It's not even about, them saying something at this point. It's the hypocrisy. And Jesus confronts religious leaders in his day with that same criticism. He calls them whitewashed tombs. And on the screen here, we see a beautiful house, but then we open up the windows and what's inside? Well, those whitewashed tombs had beautiful white paint on them, but inside, what's in a tomb? Dead things. And inside this beautiful house, we have all these disgusting monsters. Those are some people. Not the monsters, the house. It's got some nasty monsters in you. That's what Jesus says about the Pharisees. I don't know. Outside, they're painted nice, but inside, they're dead people. Why do you judge if you're bad? You step on God's grace instead of loving that grace and sharing it with other people, because God loves us in spite of our shortcomings. Do you think the person that you're judging is not loved by God? Do you think that you're loved by God because you're good? Ha! What a goofy laugh. While we were sinners, Christ died for us, not while we were good. And so he says that we store up wrath for ourselves. We store up God's anger. You ever seen this up on the screen? We got this guy. You know what he's going to say? What's in your wallet? I can't do his voice. But, we have what's in your wallet. I have to be careful to even talk about what's the deal with the church. Because if I give people the wrong idea, the church is Christ's bride. And he cares about the church. See, we can store up treasure in our wallets by caring for those that God loves, which is everyone, or we can store up judgment by stepping on them and being hypocritical. So is the church full of hypocrites? Yes. But Christians aren't saved because they're good. Their church isn't saved because it's a good place. They're saved because they ask Jesus for help. So our second question, why doesn't God like people outside the church? Well, we will read verses 6 through 11, which say, "But God will repay each one according to what they have done. To those who by persistence in doing good seek glory, honor, and immortality, he will give eternal life. But to those who are self-seeking and who reject truth and follow evil, there will be wrath and anger. There will be trouble and distress for every human being who does evil, first to the Jew, and then also to the Gentile. But glory, honor, and peace for everyone who does good, first to the Jew, then for the Gentile. For God does not show favoritism." So why doesn't God like people outside the church? Well, we're going to see here, God does not show favoritism. See, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and they're about church leaders who just get off scot-free. They do terrible things, they have affairs, and then the other church leaders in the church are like, it's fine. It's whatever, There was a thing where this pastor had an emotional affair, so they didn't have sex. But he had an affair with a young woman, if I'm remembering correctly, and that pastor was kept in his role so that he could be restored as a pastor. Really? I like this critic right here. Really, bro? For real? See, each person can get what they deserve. And I say can here because you should read that with terror. Getting what you deserve, if not for Jesus, hell is what we would get because that's what we deserve. We have brought evil into God's world. Lying, hatred, lust, greed, hypocrisy. The only reason some people don't get what they deserve is because Jesus took it for them on the cross. That's what we deserve. And he says that this is going to happen first to those who are on the inside. If you know more, you are accountable to more. Look at this picture up here. There's a doctor on a plane. And the flight attendant says, "This guy's choking. Is there a doctor here?" And the doctor says, "I'm off duty, man. I ain't getting paid. I'm not going to help." Does he have more responsibility here to help even though he's not getting paid? Yes, because he knows how to help that person. And so if he doesn't help that person, guess what? He's probably going to get sued. Why? Because he's accountable because he knows how to do the thing that needs to be done. And teachers, they study the Bible. So they should know how to do those things even better than the normal person. And they should do them better. And God does not show favoritism. He doesn't show favor. You got this goofy picture up on the screen. So silly. And then we have someone criticizing it, skeptical. Jesus doesn't say, "Oh yeah, that guy over there, he's my favorite. He can do whatever he wants." No. Let's chill Jesus. He gets a big old X on him because that's not the real historical Jesus. And that skeptical guy gets a yes because that's weird. See, Paul, the guy writing this letter, he was an elite Jew. He was he was cream of the crop, whatever, top of the top. And he writes that did him absolutely no good. Your parents' faith does you no good. Your church attendance does you no good. None of that matters. What matters is your personal relationship with Jesus, personally inside of you, because God sees the heart and judges the heart. Why doesn't God like people outside the church? Well, that's not true. God doesn't show favoritism. He sees the heart and he judges the heart. And so our third question, why are outsiders punished if they don't know? Let's take a look at verses 12 through 16. It says, "All who sin apart from the law will also perish apart from the law, and all who sin under the law will be judged by the law. For it is not those who hear the law who are righteous in God's sight, but those who obey the law who will be declared righteous. Indeed, when Gentiles who do not have the law do by nature things required by the law, they were a law for themselves, even though they don't have the law. They show that the requirements of the law are written on their hearts, their consciousness also bearing witness, or consciences also bearing witness, and their thoughts sometimes accusing or at other times even defending them. This will take place on the day when God judges people's secrets through Christ Jesus, as my gospel declares." Our third question, why are outsides punished if they don't know? People don't know any better, so why would you get punished for that? Well, Paul says here, your conscience is written on your heart. That law is in here. So, I think it's a great criticism. We have this up on the screen. How is it fair for people who don't know Jesus to be judged by the things that Jesus says? I think that's a great criticism. But Paul answers that right here. And he says, those who follow what Jesus says, they are right. So you can hear, all of you, because you're listening to this right now. You've heard this. You know what to do, but you have to choose to follow it. Every single one of us has heard this because we're sitting in here right now, and we still don't follow it. I heard a pastor's story on this. He read a book to his little son, about 3 years old, and it had a bunch of scribbles in it. And he says, how'd these scribbles get here? That's weird. And the son looks at him bold-faced and says, "Mommy did it." Really? Your mom scribbled in your book? That's really weird. See, no one had to send this guy off to college to teach him to lie, even though that was a really bad lie to begin with. We don't have to be taught to do things that are evil. We know the things that are good, and we have to follow them. And those who follow them, follow the good things, those are the ones who are right. And even outsiders follow something. It is a very, very, very convenient thing for us that if we lie, cheat, steal, and gossip all the time, people don't like you. They don't like you. They don't like people like that. And so you know not to do it. And maybe you never knew, as a Christian that you shouldn't speed because, we're commanded to follow governmental laws. And maybe as a non-Christian, you don't know that. Okay, that's fine. Maybe you're not judged for that. But you knew not to lie, steal, gossip, be a hypocrite, all those things. And so those are the things that we are judged by. The things that we know or the things that we ought to have known. And we have this picture up here. Should I kill them or should I not kill them? Do you think he has any writing on his heart as to whether or not he should murder this person? I would think so. And he's judged according to that. Because God judges correctly between good and evil. There's a good side and there's a bad side. And you'll notice on the bad side, it's a ton of people. And on the good side, it's just Jesus. Because it's not church versus the world, good versus bad. No. It's God versus everyone. And if you want to be on the good side, you got to be covered by Jesus. Because newsflash, Jesus says, nobody is good but God. Nobody. Everyone knows enough to ask for help. And everyone has picked a side. So why are outsiders punished if they don't know? Everyone knows enough to ask for help. And everyone has picked a side. With that, we move on to our fourth question. So who really are God's people? Let's read verses 17 through 24, which say, "Now you, if you call yourself a Jew, if you rely on the law and boast in God, if you know his will and approve of what is superior because you are instructed by the law, if you are convinced that you are a guide for the blind, a light for those in the dark, an instructor of the foolish, a teacher of little children, because you have in the law the embodiment of knowledge and truth. You then who teach others, do you not teach yourself? You who preach against stealing, do you steal? You that say people should not commit adultery, do you commit adultery? You who hate idols, do you rob temples? You who boast in the law, do you dishonor God by breaking the law? As it is written, God's name is blasphemed among the Gentiles because of you." See, how can bad people be God's people? That's a great question. How are God's people consistently bad? See, this is a real controversy today, because if you grew up in church, you likely see Israel as God's people today. And I'm not going to comment on that, but there's many people who view Israel as God's people, and there are many people who view Israel as a nation that is murdering Palestinian children. And those two are kind of hard to reconcile. So Paul answers and steps into a situation similar to that, and he answers how or who really are God's people. And he says this: the church, God's people, firstly, should be a place of guidance. Jesus says, "Let your light shine." The nursery rhyme, "This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine." And then it goes, "Hide it under a bushel." No, I'm going to let it shine. You probably know that already. Well, what people typically do, especially when you think of, how can bad people be God's people? What people typically do is they have a little light. And have you ever seen those, it's kind of like a jack-o'-lantern, but you'll see it up on the screen here. It's a scary mask that you put over it to scare them away from Jesus instead of bringing them to the light. Yeah, it's kind of goofy. See, the church should be a place of guidance, but often that guidance is replaced with something that makes people not want to go and be with God. And so he says, don't we teach ourselves first? See, if we're God's people, we have to walk in that before calling others to do it, because it is a hard walk, and it astounds me when people think following Jesus means you're instantly fixed. Have you ever heard this phrase? I have. I can't follow Jesus because I'm gay. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of things for Jesus to work on in our lives too. We just have to keep trying every day. That's not something stopping you from starting to follow Jesus. But our final thing is, who are God's people? Don't be a hypocrite. Pretty straightforward. That's the next thing that Paul says. We have a story of an Orthodox church. We got a bunch of pews up here on the screen and a woman. And there's this woman who's not wearing a hair covering. Eastern Orthodox, you wear a hair covering on. It's in 1 Corinthians. So you'd wear a hair covering and a woman comes in without a hair covering. Big scandal. That new woman comes and the congregation, they comment on it. And the next week, the pastor came up and his sermon was basically this. Thank you for commenting on how that woman was an outsider to you. Now, she may never come back to church again. And he left. Because obviously that's terrible. To just point out the sin in other people's lives without trying to walk with them. That's a hypocrite. That's being two-faced, what we were just talking about. Because God is doing a lot of things in all of us. As it has been said, we're just starving people telling other starving people where to find bread, which is Jesus. So let me ask, who are God's people? It's those who know him personally. And then a final question. Aren't I good if I go to church? Well, let's finish out reading verses 25 through 29, which say, circumcision has value if you observe the law, but if you break the law, you have as though you had not, or you have become as though you have not been circumcised. So then if you who are not circumcised keeps the law's requirement, will they not be regarded as though they were circumcised? The one who is not circumcised physically and yet obeys the law will condemn you, even though you have the written code and circumcision are a lawbreaker. A person is not a Jew who is only one outwardly, nor is circumcision merely outward and physical. No, a person is a Jew who is one inwardly, and circumcision is circumcision of the heart, by the Spirit, not by the written code. Such a person's praise is not from other people, but from God. Our final question, aren't I good if I go to church? Well, have you ever asked a person, are you a Christian? And they respond with, I've been baptized, or I go to church. That is not the same question. Are you a Christian means do you have a personal, active relationship with Jesus? Not, I go to church. Or, I was baptized 10 years ago. No, that's not the same thing at all. Now with that, let's get really uncomfortable real quick. Circumcision is something Paul is going to talk about a lot. I know, it's crazy. Crazy switch up here. Let's get real uncomfortable. Every Israelite in the Old Testament, all of God's people, had to have a chunk of flesh cut out of their genitals. Yeah. It's insane. It's pretty hardcore. All right, if you're going to be a Jew, you have to have a chunk of flesh cut out of your genitals. That's a pretty big deal. You mean it if you're going to be a Jew. All right? Especially if you didn't grow up a Jew and you're a 30-year-old man and you got to go through that. That's terrible. See, but Paul says even that kind of commitment to cut yourself for God doesn't mean anything if you don't have a relationship with him. See, circumcision is nothing if you don't obey everything. And if you don't obey everything, what are you going to do? You're apart from God. It's the relationship that saves you. So let's take a look. He says following is better. So let me pose a circumstance for you. What is better? I do dishes for Emma and then I disappear. And then I come back for an hour and do dishes and then I'm gone. Then I come back for an hour, and this is over days and days. And that's the only thing that I do, is I do the dishes for Emma and then I'm gone. Or if I spend time with Emma. Which one of those do you think is more important? I mean, dishes, of course. Like, if I really love Emma, I'm gonna help her with stuff, right? But don't I also have to spend time with her? See, you ever heard the thing, would you love me if I was a worm? God would love us if we're worms. And you know how I know that? Because the things that we do for God, they're about as useful as if a worm was trying to help us with stuff. Because anything that we can do, God can do better. That's just the reality of it. See, he wants us to know him and know his love, and that's what is more important. And when we know him personally, yeah, we're going to want to serve him. But if we just serve him without knowing him, it doesn't mean a thing. It's like I'm doing the dishes for Emma and I have no relationship with her. I'm a stranger to her. I'm not loving. And the second thing is, the law written on the heart is what is praised by God. The Bible industry is insane. For real. It is insane. I lost my Bible at college, and I paid $80 for a cool commentary Bible at Barnes & Noble, and it's up on the screen. And that is the real price. I looked that up today, which is Wednesday. It is $80. This is the exact Bible that I got. It's really cool. NET, all the textual criticism stuff that I like, whatever. And what do you think means more to God? My $80 Bible or my free Bible phone app? Well, I would think the $80 Bible, but I don't even know where my $80 Bible is because I exclusively use my phone app and I listen to my phone app with Emma each night. So which one of those do you think means more? The $80 one or the one that actually gets used? Obviously, it's the one that actually gets used. Why? Aren't I good if I go to church? No. Because relationship matters most. Circumcision is nothing if you don't have a relationship. Serving Emma is nothing if we don't have a relationship. Relationship matters most. I'm not a good husband if I just go to marriage classes. Marriage classes are awesome. But if I only use that knowledge, or but only if I use that knowledge to love my wife and soon to be son, they're only awesome if I actually do the stuff because I love them, not because I just go and show up. Going to church doesn't help me unless I have a relationship with Jesus. Otherwise, it doesn't do anything for me. So with that, let's take a look at our 5 questions. What's the deal with the church? Isn't the church full of hypocrites? Yeah. But Christians aren't saved because they're good. They're saved because they ask Jesus for help. Why doesn't God like people outside the church? Well, God actually shows no favoritism. He sees the heart and judges the heart. Why are outsiders punished if they don't know? Well, everyone knows enough to ask for help, and everyone has picked a side in what they're going to do, whether helping themselves or having Jesus help them. 4th, who are God's people? Well, it's those who actually know God personally. And finally, aren't I good if I go to church? No, you're not, because relationship matters most over showing up. So with that, thanks for joining us. Super excited to go over this next time on chapter 3 of Romans.